Where are you coming from? Where are you going? The gospel today starts now on that same day. And that same day that begins our reading is Easter Day. The day when the women had come to Jesus' tomb to anoint his body, but they found an empty tomb instead, and messengers from God who told them, he is risen. Where are you coming from today? What happened yesterday? Take a second. Think about it. Is there something that happened yesterday or this morning that's got you so that you want to cover your eyes? Is there something that's got you looking down? What's got your mind clouded? Maybe it's a list of 20 things you have to get done before this week starts. Maybe it's that someone didn't call. Maybe it's a call you did get. Maybe it's family. Maybe it's work. Maybe it's friends. My friend Greg once worked at a women's homeless shelter. Every day this shelter would open for lunch and would serve any woman who needed a meal. As the women walked in, formed a line, many of them had hunched shoulders. Many hid their eyes with sunglasses or hats, or just by looking down. They would come in tired, hungry. Many of them lived with mental illness or addiction. And so looking at this line of women at first glance, my friend said, could be very intimidating. The disciples on the road to Emmaus that we read about today are not just out for a stroll. They are walking from Jerusalem, where they had just seen their rabbi handed over. They had just seen Jesus humiliated and crucified. They are coming from a traumatic event. They had hoped that this one, Jesus, would have been the one to deliver their occupied land into freedom, but they saw him defeated. When Jesus, who they don't recognize as Jesus, talks to them, they stood still, looking sad. They were so consumed with their grief, so occupied with what had happened, that they were unable to see who was right before them. Now, it's easy for us today, for me, to dismiss these disciples. I think, again, they don't get it. The Gospels are full of times when the disciples don't get it, and Jesus has to explain it to them. This seems like just one more example where they don't get it. Yet in this story, I really feel for the disciples. They're in grief. Everything that they had poured their life into, their whole mission, they gave up everything to follow Jesus. All of this seems to have come to an end with Jesus' death. The Roman Empire was not overthrown. They do not see a physical sign of change. They are blinded at this moment by their grief, their disappointment, their sadness, so much so that they do not think that Jesus has fulfilled the prophecies which he said he would fulfill. Where are you coming from today? Where are you going? When my friend Greg took a risk and sat down with these women without homes at the shelter, his sitting with them would sometimes be met with rejection or silence or confusion. Yet in other times his sitting would reveal something wonderful. Some women made it clear that they were not ready to have someone even sit next to them. But others, while you sat and ate and said hello, would reveal to you kindness. You could see and hear of their hardship, certainly, but you could also feel welcome and laughter and connection over a meal. There were a few women who regularly played cards and Scrabble after their meal was over. And after a time, after showing up enough times, Greg was invited to play with these women. And in the daily shared meal, and in the card playing, Connections were made. Stories were told. Lives were shared. Smiles, happiness were shared. And possibilities and opportunities were presented for all who were at that table. In food, in welcome, our lives are opened up. When a meal is shared, so is sadness, so is grief, so is joy and celebration, and so is love. While they were still on the road together, while Jesus is still not recognized, Jesus calls the disciples slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. And again, I feel for those disciples. Sure, they were slow of heart, but they were defeated. They were sad. They thought they had a Messiah, one to free Israel, but they had seen him crucified. They thought him dead. What did you bring with you today that has your hearts hardened? Why do you have your eyes today looking down? Yet in their grief, the disciples do something that impresses me more every time I read it. It's getting dark out. They've been walking with this stranger, who is Jesus. It's the end of the day. And they say to this stranger, "Stay with us. It's almost evening. The day's almost over. Come in. Have a meal with us." In the middle of their sadness, in the middle of their confusion, and even with slow hearts, the two disciples extend a welcome, an invitation to dinner. And when they go inside, Jesus, the stranger, takes bread, blesses it, breaks it, and gives it to them. And in that moment, in the sharing of a meal within the table of welcome, they see that Jesus has been with them the whole time. And their hearts are no longer slow. But they say, "Weren't our hearts burning within us as he spoke to us?" And they recognize the risen Christ among them. The disciples who seem still not to get it have welcomed in the stranger, just as Christ had said to them, "When you welcome the stranger, you welcome me." The disciples do something right. And the disciples do what Jesus had asked them earlier. They welcomed in that moment, Christ. Where have you come from today? Where are you going? After the disciples recognize that Jesus was among them, they do something interesting. They don't stay in Emmaus. They don't keep going to this little village. They turn around. They turn around. And they return to Jerusalem to tell the others, he is risen indeed. They return to the site of where their pain and sadness originated, and they tell the good news. I'm going to make a confession. Don't tell anybody. Or you could tell everyone. It's okay. Sometimes it's hard for me to see Jesus. Sometimes I don't see him around. Sometimes I wonder if he's not coming back. Sometimes I wonder if Jesus is still dead. But then I read this story, and I think of these two disciples, and the women at the tomb earlier on Easter Day. And I think of Greg and the women at the shelter. And I think of breaking bread and sharing meals, and I know that I have seen Christ risen. And I especially think about welcome and invitation and meals shared in sadness, meals shared in joy, meals shared in grief. Christ was with the disciples the whole time, but the disciples did not recognize him until they invited in what they thought was a stranger and had some bread together. Christ is here, my friends, on this journey, on your journey, in food, in welcome, in this meal before us. Jesus shows up. When a meal is shared, as I've said, so is sadness, grief, joy, celebration, love, and Jesus shows up. How can we this week extend that invitation? How can you, how can I welcome Christ into our lives? How do we break bread with the risen Christ? I hope that we can look for opportunities to extend an invitation to our friends, to our family, to strangers, people we know well to people we don't know. Because as Christ said, when we welcome those into our lives, we welcome Christ. Remember that no matter where you have come from today, no matter where you're going, Christ is with you. For Christ is risen. Hallelujah. Amen. May it indeed be so.